Welcome to a really important episode about managing risk and protecting vulnerable people. Please be aware that it does talk about some sensitive topics like child sexual abuse. If you'd prefer not to listen to this part, please push pause or stop the recording about halfway through. And if this raises difficult feelings for you and you'd like to talk to someone, please be aware that our friends at Lifeline are around 24/7 on 13 11 14. Thank you to our guest for her incredible leadership and courage. Hello and welcome to the Female Executive Survival Guide podcast. I'm Lauren Eyles, an executive coach and mentor with a ton of leadership and board experience to share. Leadership can be lonely, so I'm here to introduce you to amazing leaders so you can learn from us and get to where you want to be quicker. Welcome. Today we'll be talking about what good governance means and your role as a leader. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on the lands of the Awabakal people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. When you step into senior management or a board role, you'll often hear the term governance. As a leader, you really need to understand how risks are identified and managed in your organisation, not only at the management level, but at the board level, and who is responsible for what. It's also important to know your personal responsibilities in minimising risk and maximising reward for the organisation. Whether you're in a leadership role or thinking about joining a board, I really recommend completing a corporate governance course if you haven't yet. And this conversation will really get you thinking about where to invest your time and attention in learning about governance. Today's guest is passionate about good governance and ethical decision making. Paula Davies is a senior legal executive and a non-executive director who specialises in corporate governance and risk management. Paula has led multidisciplinary teams that have developed and managed effective compliance and ethics programs within large and complex organisations. Paula believes that good decision making starts with a strong and ethical corporate culture. In addition to her General Counsel and Company Secretary role with the Adelaide Primary Health Network, Paula is a non-executive director across many sectors with a passion for safeguarding the rights and well-being of children and adults, and also a fellow member of Women on Boards, which is where we connected. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Lauren. It's lovely to be here.
You've built an incredibly diverse career. I'd love to know what led you to corporate governance, leadership and board work.
Yes, it's a sound observation about the diversity. I like a bit of variety, I suppose. But I think I can see, when I look back on my career, I can see the threads of what has become now. It's very much apparent to me now. As a lawyer, I was in-house from a fairly young age. I was in private practice for 7 or 8 years, but I found I grew a bit disenfranchised with, how can I put this? I felt like it was largely about money, and sometimes it was difficult for the other aspects of the things that I cared about to be, fully explored. So I very early on in my career moved into sort of in-house roles, primarily in the early stages in sort of government or government corporations, and then into the not-for-profit sector. But I think it became very apparent to me the marriage between legal and governance was when I was working for the police, SAPOL, as a senior legal counsel, and I was asked to join the board of Blue Light. The commissioner was the patron, and they were looking to do some constitutional reform, big change management piece. It was around about the time of the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sexual Abuse. So there was a lot of energy around doing this well in terms of an organisation that has vulnerable children and youth as its core stakeholder group. So that was when I really, I would say it became more explicit rather than just part of my, extracurricular activities. This is when I really started to feel that was where I belonged in the boardroom and helping to support good governance around, organisations that I care about. And at that point I was very lucky to be awarded a scholarship to do the AICD course again. I'd done it at a very early stage in my career and hadn't really fully appreciated the importance of it. And I think that's really where it's come from. So that's sort of like 10 years ago now. So that when I did that, and everything that's happened since then has been about embedding that and really enjoying exploring that aspect. I'd say that's the next phase of my career, which will be I'll head into that pathway.
Fantastic. I did my AICD course 10 years ago too, and it really brought a lot of things to life.
Oh, doesn't it? It just kind of joins it all up. And I often say to people, obviously, if you're in a regional area and it's difficult to get in to do it in person, then absolutely do the online version. But I actually think being in the room is very powerful. And the learnings I got from the other people in the room and the connections that you form, but just that sense of understanding how it all plays out. Very, very interesting.
I couldn't agree more. I was lucky enough to do mine in Sydney. I travelled from Newcastle to Sydney. The amazing people and roles that they hold, people who'd built and sold companies, big ASX companies, big national brands. And part of what I really loved was how the training was delivered. And this is not an ad for the AICD, no sponsorship here.
No.
I just really loved it.
No.
And the participation where you're contributing ideas and you're giving answers. And I was in my early 30s at the time. I was a couple of years into my executive career, and it really boosted my confidence knowing that I could contribute at that level and with people of that calibre.
And where else do you get, in such a short period of time, exposed to that sort of calibre of people, leaders at very different spaces and different stages of their career? And I was very fortunate. I know that.
Yeah, I love it. So if you were speaking to someone in their first executive role and they're completely brand new to corporate governance, what advice would you give them?
And assuming they're wanting to understand this better rather than being oblivious to it, of course. I think, we talked about Women on Boards is a great organisation to get connected to. I've been a member for a very, very long time. And you don't need to be on a board. I mean, the name Women on Boards doesn't mean you're literally on one, although many people are, or they aspire to be. But it actually connects you in with a whole, world of understanding around governance. And there's, opportunities to do some courses, go along to talks. I've learned a lot from just going along to an event and listening to someone talk about their career. If you can, try and connect in with someone potentially in a mentoring role, someone that you sort of see in that space that you might be able to gain some knowledge from. But all those kind of networking events that you can connect in with like-minded individuals who you learn from those conversations. It's not just about the talk or the course, it's about the conversations that happen in the room or after a basic course. I've raved about AICD and I will continue to do so. But, let's be frank, it's not cheap. And unless you're fortunate enough to get a scholarship, it's not necessarily within reach of everyone. But there are other courses, we can perhaps, put some up in the notes around some not-for-profit courses that are very minimal fees, or you can get some scholarships for. You don't actually have to do the AICD full directorship to get the knowledge that you need. And the Governance Institute of Australia also has, I've done some work with them, and they've also got some really good learnings and some forums that you can go along to. Much more affordable, but as I say, you can just do it in bite-sized chunks. But surround yourself with people who are passionate about it and reach out to them, and never be afraid to, I've had many really wonderful conversations and experiences because I found someone on LinkedIn that I've, seen talk at an event and say, hi, can I borrow your coffee or, lunch or drink after work, whatever floats your boat. And you'll connect and learn so much and gain so much. People, I think people find it flattering, so there's no real loss in, you reach out and someone's not engaging, well, reach out to someone else. It'll be someone who will be very open to giving back, is a bit trite, but you know what I mean, to helping others on the journey, because, you've got to start somewhere, and we all start somewhere.
Absolutely, and that's a really good call out. The Women on Boards and the Governance Institute are also incredibly well regarded and have great learning. And I think too, sometimes our libraries, university or local council library, have some great resources, and And the other thing I think people can look out for is the different magazines that their CEO or colleagues subscribe to lying around the kitchen. You can often find the latest magazine from the particular organisation just sitting there.
I agree. And, recycle. I mean, that's sustainable as well. It's not, not everything requires a huge amount of money, and nor should it. This knowledge should be freely available to all. I think just be curious and be open to learning. And, we're all learning. I'm learning. You're presumably learning.
Always, lifelong.
You don't reach a point where you go, oh, I know everything.
Yes.
No, you just get different layers of complexity. And then you go, okay, now that I've mastered that, how about this? And, at the moment I'm on a bit of a AI journey, I suppose, for want of a better description, and trying to understand more about that, recognising I'm not an expert, but also knowing you can't manage something if you don't understand it, and what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and so 4 or 5 years ago I wasn't even really thinking about AI, and now it's kind of every second conversation almost.
Same here. So what are some of the key documents and tools and frameworks that an executive needs to be across to understand risk management in their organisation?
Fundamentals are your risk management policy and your risk appetite policy. Sometimes they're embedded in the same document, frequently they're not. Your risk management policy is really about, what we understand is risk, what we plan on doing about it, what our systems and layers of accountability from the board through to operational levels, and how it all fits together so that you can't have gaps. You've got a situation whereby a risk appetite that's being set by the board is being understood and operationalised at all levels, and issues that are arising are fed back and tested, and assurance, etc. But we can talk about risk management policies and risk appetite policies, and people will just eyes glaze over and the matrix and things like that. That's kind of a little bit of jargon. For me, it's about actually going, what do we understand is risk? Because the risk happens. It's like a conflict of interest. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's how you manage it. Okay, so it's understanding what we mean when we talk about risk, and how comfortable we feel about that. There are organisations that are very gung-ho, and they're like, yeah, well, we're very comfortable having a significant amount of risk in our operational and strategic endeavours. But then there are other organisations that are very conservative, and you have to be very mindful of what is tolerated. But you can't do that if you're not having those conversations. It can't just be a document that you trot out once a year and go, yep, that looks good, sign off, bang, pop it away in a cupboard. It's got to be a living document, and the best way that can be is if everyone understands what's going, what it is that we are identifying as our key risks and what we want to do about them, and actually is what we're doing about them making a difference. Because if it's not, then you probably need to rethink that. It's just about demystifying this. Risk is just something that arises in the ordinary course of business. You can't have a risk-free space. It's about what things do we care about that we want to focus our attention on to try and mitigate, cybersecurity being an obvious issue, given the last few years. But again, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7 years ago, we weren't really fixated on that to the extent that we are now. So things change over time, and it's also being willing to actually revisit and go, is this something that's still something that we're worried about? Or if we mitigated that fully, by which I mean reduced it down to a manageable level. There's a few basic documents, but more important, I think, is understanding how it all comes together in your organisation, and what to do when you're unsure is reach out and ask a question, because if you don't know, someone else might be in the same boat.
And I think you touched on understanding the board's risk appetite. That's something I've found really helpful, because I've worked for an asset where we were government owned and then we privatised and became commercially owned. And some of the risks, all the risks carry across, but your tolerance for particular things can change depending on your shareholding and your exposure to liability, but also how hungry you are for reward. So if you're commercially owned, you've got bigger pressure on you to get commercial results. You're probably in an environment that has a higher level of competition. Things can change around that to open up markets. So there's going to be some commercial risks that you'll handle differently to if you're government owned, where you might be a bit more constrained in terms of your direction by your shareholder. Have you found that?
Yes, when you mentioned about the pathway to being privately owned from government. I experienced the opposite. I was at Hunter Water in 1999. Those who are old enough will remember that was a significant year in terms of it was heading in the pathway to privatisation, and then all of a sudden crypto sporidium, and of course Hunter and Sydney Water were sort of reversed, and so it was almost like decorporatised. Wow. And that changed the nature of that space. But it can even be in the context of a different political cycle, so it doesn't even have to be a change of environment, as in change of entity. It can be you're in a different world right now. I mean, think about what's happened recently with the election and how that is potentially changing some of the dynamics of some organisations, because the political situation, the political environment has changed as a result. So things can change, like that. But yeah, I mean, really, at the end of the day, the board is there to set the appetite, and it needs to be really understood very clearly what that is, and then that cascade down to the various levels. You should never have someone wandering around going, I don't know whether or not I've got a authority to act in this space, and whether or not this is something that I need to be worried about or not. People shouldn't be in doubt. I think it's about clarity. There's no wrong or right risk appetite. It's more about, okay, what is the risk appetite? Do we all understand it? And what are we doing about it to make sure that we are sitting within those, I'll call them guardrails. I think it's actually an empowering space too. It's like, okay, well, we understand in this space, in these categories, we're comfortable with a modest amount, or more than modest amount of risk. Okay, so that can be an entrepreneurial space, that can be an innovative space. But where it's more, oh no, we need to be mindful of this because we don't want to be in breach of the deed that we've got with the government, for example, then you then put more effort around that to make sure that you're staying within those parameters. I think it's clarity. What has Brene Brown said something about clear as kind. I think it's really important that we just understand. There's no bad or good or bad. It just is.
Absolutely, and it's so important for executives to remember to take the time after board meetings to close the loop with their teams and make sure that those key decisions and the context around it flows through their leadership and managerial teams, so that you've got the context. You don't just have the directive, you understand why and how that fits into your role and helps you do what you do better.
Yeah, I'm in an organisation where minutes of the executive leadership group, in a sort of modified format perhaps, are circulated to all leadership. And I've remarked on that to my CEO once. I said, I really like that this is done. And she just thought it was just normal, but it's not normal. There's often organisations where there's a lot of opaqueness, shall we say. And so I think it's about, if people understand the why, if people understand, if they've got some context around, actually this is a really important issue that we need to be focused on, and this is getting a lot of attention and airtime at that level, I think that can be really helpful, other than, as you say, you need to do this, why? Just do it. That's not helpful.
Yes.
People disengage. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm being a bit blunt, but what I'm saying, sometimes it can feel that I don't understand why I'm doing this, and no one will give me an answer. That's not very empowering.
Definitely. So in your experience as a director, what are directors looking for from management?
Really good question. I've often found, and I've been in this space for a while now, this tension between, in the operational space and staying in your lane, and board directors can sometimes want to go in a bit deep at times, and you've got to pull back, and management, they've got this. They've got their priorities at an operational level, and I've worked in organisations where there's a frustration around the level of information that the board's seeking, because it's kind of deflecting from their operational work, and I've certainly seen the tensions play out. So I think transparency and an answer to their questions, and I suppose also a sense of, perhaps it's easy to forget that when you're operational and you're not on the board, and particularly if you're not on any board, that you're not actually across all the details. So sometimes you need a bit of context in order to have an informed discussion around a particular issue. So you need a bit of background, but you can't be overwhelmed. You haven't got, as a board director, you can't be reading thousands of pages of documents to try and understand something. So I think they're looking for management, exec or otherwise, to distill issues in that bite-sized, manageable way, so that they can rapidly come to grips with a particular issue, and then make informed decisions around whatever is being asked of them. And even then, making it clear why this paper is going to the board. What are you actually seeking? Sometimes it can just be, here and tell us what you think. What do you mean? So there's got to be a purpose. That you don't just take something to the board for the sake of taking it to the board. There's got to be, we need approval, you need to be aware, we need to discuss this, we want your feedback. So being clear, again, two-way street. And I think it's fair. I've worked in organisations where there was frustration amongst the exec because they weren't clear what the board wanted. But maybe that means they've got to ask, what is it, and maybe that's a conversation with the CEO and the chair or something of that nature. So transparency, answer their questions. Worst thing you can do is try and deflect and block and push back, because I've also seen that blow up very badly, and you just get overwhelmed with questions and queries because there's no trust. And once that breaks down, it's very hard to regain. So sometimes you just got to give more in the short term in order to not have to be spending your days responding to board papers and requests. It's really difficult to do, though.
Yeah, true. I think the more you educate yourself as a leader about the world of a director, the better you're able to hit the nail on the head with what's in a paper, and the more that the questions make sense, because when you've been a director, even in a pro bono context, like I have been for this is my 7th year, you understand what personal liability looks like, means and feels like, and therefore you know that when directors are asking you questions, they're not trying to trip you up, they're just satisfying their director's duties and their fiduciary responsibility.
100%. And that's a really good point. Depersonalise it. It's not actually about, these are questions that are being asked, and I'm on boards and we will ask questions, and you have you try and have a very healthy professional relationship, sure, but sometimes you actually have to go, well, where is the evidence of that, and how do we know that? And it's not that I'm calling them a liar, I'm actually just trying to do my job.
Yes.
So I think, you've hit the nail on the head there. Being on a board or being on a committee or, being in that oversight role gives you capacity to understand that when you're reporting to it. I'm 100% certain that it has made me a better executive leader at times when I've been in those roles than when than if I'd not ever had that. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And you don't need to be on a board of an ASX company to be able to say that. And even I'm thinking committees of management of local not-for-profits. It's the same skill. It doesn't change between that and a really large company. It's just that the content will change, the subject matters might change, and the level of zeros in the documents might change, but the role and function's not different.
That's a really good point. It's also made me a better presenter at a board level, because as a director, if I sit through a half-hour presentation and I don't have time to ask questions, I sit there feeling really frustrated because I've read the report, I've done my homework before the meeting. So as an executive, when I present now, I largely take it as read. I recap on a few key points. I check in at the beginning about how much time we got with the chair, because sometimes things change in their world. I do a quick recap, and then I use the time for discussion. And I find that, especially if you've got a really communicative, engaged board who like to sort of work through things by listening to each other, I found that was really well received, because you're using their time better. Have you found that too?
And you're actually 100%. And also you get more out of it. I mean, if you're just there to present and then you go, okay, well, that's great, thank you, Paula or Lauren. Okay, what is, I like to sort of get some interaction and sort of, am I hitting the mark? But what do you think? Like, I know what I think, but what do you think? Because this might help the future. So, I agree. Get more out of the exchange. It's not just about ticking a box, I've done that presentation and I'll move on. How can we actually, because it'll help you in future presentations, and you learn more about who your board are and what they need and what they don't need.
So safeguarding is such an important aspect of risk management, not just for organisations supporting children and people with a disability and older people, but also for our individual leadership responsibility. How would you describe safeguarding in your own words if someone's not from that sector?
At a fundamental level, it is about how we entrust, or rather we create a safe space for those who are entrusted either in our care or we are responsible for, or who are significant stakeholders. So, I'm thinking childcare centres and sporting groups and, and churches and things like that. So it's about how you have systems and processes in place that are designed to prevent harm in all its forms, whether that's physical, psychological, and more to the point, do something, that there's a system and process that's in place that if something does happen, there's a way of addressing that to try and prevent future harm. This can often be the case in the context of children who are abused in either care or in environments. Maybe you can't prevent that first incident, and I'm happy to debate that. But you need a system such that there's something that raises that as a flag, that there are processes that are trustworthy and trauma-informed and client-centred, so that those people feel confident raising these issues and something gets done about it to prevent it happening to others. And I think the tragedy, and we saw it play out in the Royal Commission and all sorts of other areas as well, is that nothing is done and it continues, and people get moved around, and people lack, whether courage or confidence in systems to raise things. So for me, safeguarding is around the systems that exist to try and prevent it. Basic, fundamental, working with children check. That's the first thing. If you have more than incidental contact with children in a setting, then you should have that. That won't prevent everything, but it'll prevent someone who's on a registered sex offender from being employed in that environment. So there's basic layers, and then there's more sophisticated and nuanced layers around how you actually address when something goes wrong, what you do about it to prevent it happening more, and you actually learn from that to try and strengthen those systems, rather than just go, oh, that's unfortunate, next, and then act all surprised 5 years later that you've got a long line of victims or people who have been otherwise impacted, including their family and supporters.
Really good point. And we're at a point in history where there's enough information around for us to learn from things that have gone wrong elsewhere in order to make sure that we're leading with best practice.
You like to think so, and yet the number of conversations I've had with people who I feel lack some awareness around just some basic fundamentals like grooming, and I was in a role in the safeguarding space for a church once, and the comment that I encountered in one of my readings, I suppose, was about they groom the congregation before they groom the child. And if we could just get that, when people talk about these people who are otherwise of good character or good blokes, or women for that matter, because women can be offenders too. No, that's their MO. They were grooming you so that you wouldn't believe the allegations. So, don't get me started, because your podcast won't end. It's all there. It's all there for us to learn from. But I think, as Grace Tame said once, it's an uncomfortable conversation, and people tend to avoid those. But as she said, and I'm paraphrasing massively, it's more uncomfortable to be a victim. Absolutely. So I think if we're serious about safeguarding, and I've gone straight to child safeguarding, but it doesn't matter whether we're dealing with vulnerability, disability sector or aged care setting, we have to be willing to have those difficult conversations and hold people to account, because otherwise that we're just creating a free space for abuse in all its forms.
For sure. And I think you made a really good point there around, you've spoken earlier about having a culture of managing risk, and what you've just described, the human blind points that can happen. There are biases. That is such a flaw in human nature. We all have, and we've all got to manage with any kind of risk, because the familiarity bias or this has gone well in the past, it's not a problem kind of thinking that can get in the way of systems and structures and processes and tools that would otherwise be effective if we didn't get in the way of these great systems we've built.
And it only takes, one person coming forward and that not landing well. They'll never disclose again. I think that is often, it's very difficult when someone reveals to you for the first time something of this nature. It's happened to me professionally and personally, and it's never an easy conversation. But if it doesn't land well, they may never tell another soul.
Yes.
And it's hard to safeguard when you don't know what you're dealing with, and you can't deal with risks that you're willfully blind to.
Yeah.
So,
If we don't make it safe for people to talk about any kind of risk, we can't manage it well. So clearly it's an area of passion, which I really hope it would be for every leader, because that's part of our job. What made it a passion for you?
Yes, we're coming to that point of the conversation. When I was 9, a pedophile attempted to abduct me, and I won't, go into all the details because it's even now a difficult topic. But I've reflected on that over the years, and also more recently in terms of I did a sort of a very immersive leadership course about 4 or 5 years ago now, and I thought about how it had been a thread that had run through my life without necessarily realising how much of an impact it had. In fact, I think I'd been very, very capable of pushing it right down. And I thought about how voiceless I was at the time, how I didn't tell anyone for years. I think back now and I don't even know who I would have told and whether they would have believed me, and what would have been, like, it's a profoundly disturbing experience. But I saw this person on a train when I was a teenager, and you don't forget someone of that nature.
Yeah.
And I even then didn't have a voice. And so I think my career, the profession I chose, and my focus on safeguarding around vulnerability, they say you become the person you wish was there for you when you were a child. And I think that's what this is for me, and it's why I've been so passionate on my son's rugby club. I was the child safety officer and did all the compliance and safeguarding for a number of years, and I was very passionate. And it's why I was when I was on Blue Light, the board, when I was at SAPOL, why that became such an important turning point for me. And then, I clearly articulate it now, and I indicate to people that this is my passion and it's my purpose, and I deliberately and intentionally choose board roles that put me in the space, if not in relation to recovery from childhood sexual abuse, then vulnerability and complex trauma, which may be related to a whole lot of other challenges that people can have, including in disability and recovering from other interventions in their life. So yeah, it's a deep passion, and I sort of reflected that I'm certainly not voiceless now, and I think it's really important that that it's not something that for me personally you can just go, oh well, that's sorted. To be perfectly frank, they don't ever. Well, it is. The recidivism rate is very high, so they don't tend to reform. They don't tend to take annual leave and holidays, and so we tend to sort of think, oh, we've sorted that problem. No, they've just moved on to a more vulnerable cohort. So I just think it's really important that we are all alert and do our part. If we do, then the chance of children and other vulnerable people being victims is significantly reduced.
I'm sorry that you had that experience, and thank you for sharing that, because the statistics of what has been reported, which is probably the tip of the iceberg, remind us that many people will carry that trauma with them throughout childhood and into adulthood. And the more that we can do a great job as leaders and lean into those uncomfortable conversations and not just aim for compliance, but aim for best practice and the right thing to do, the more that we can protect the young people and the people with disability in our families and our communities.
It's a passion that I happily embrace, and one of my proudest moments professionally, it's a bit of a plug, I suppose, was when I was appointed to the board of Blue Knot Foundation late last year, and you know it's your passion when you'll do it for free.
Yes.
It's a not-for-profit, pro bono, and I happily jump on a plane and fly over for strategy meetings, and I'll stop there. But you know what your passion is, and I think it's sometimes once you unleash that, it all starts to make sense, and then you go, okay, well, this is why I'm here. So when you asked me to talk, I knew I would end up talking about this, and
Thank you for your openness.
It's all good.
If you went back in time to your first leadership role and started again, what would you do differently?
Interesting. I've reflected a bit on the sort of early stage career, because I think when I think first leadership role, I think when I'm managing people. I mean, leadership is broader than that, of course, but I think we all go to that, right? So I think about a role that I had where I had my first sort of team, and I was in that official sort of leadership executive role, and an ethical challenge arose, and I was a lot younger than I am now, of course, greener, maybe more idealistic. I think that's a function of youth, so I'm not being critical of that. I think that's fairly normal. And I remember feeling very challenged by this, and it really upset me. And I think I fought the fight, and I pushed back, and I raised concerns, but I allowed it, and I'm trying not to blame myself here, but I allowed it to impact on me. So it did actually have a big impact on me in terms of how I felt, and I struggled with it for a while, as in there were days I didn't want to go to work, and it went on for a while, okay? And I look back, and I'm not the one that chose these other behaviours, and I'm not suggesting that you can't be responsible for other people's behaviours, right, and what they were doing. But I think in my sort of zealousness, if you like, it didn't do me any favours. And so I think play the long game a bit. And also I look back and I go, I allowed some boundary violations to occur earlier on, which made it difficult when it got really bad to do anything about it. And so I would go back, put it back onto that other party. I've been saying for a very long time, pretty much all my career, I'm a lawyer, you're free to ignore my advice, but you're not free from the consequences of doing so. Now, that doesn't have to be a threat. That is more of you've asked me this, I've given you that perspective. Now it's up to you what you want to do with it. You can choose to ignore that or not, but if you choose to ignore it, you take that responsibility. Now, I can say that very comfortably now, and that's how I live my life professionally. I will give people advice, and I don't get attached to whether or not they follow it or not, and then I act accordingly. I think back then I was more invested in being listened to, and maybe that's connected back to that other topic we just talked about. But now it becomes, have really good boundaries, take good care of you, so that when those difficult situations arise, you're not all run down at that point and on your last, limb. And so, I look back and I think that for me was a huge learning. I learned a lot from that experience, not just in terms of what to do, but what not to do. And I think sometimes we've got to call it earlier. Not allow ourselves to enable poor behaviour until it reaches the point where it's so bad we actually have to act. I remember having a conversation with someone I'm in a walking group, and we were talking about not this situation, but a workplace situation that had unfolded for her. And we were talking about you know, how it got so bad that she had to leave. And I was like, why does it have to get so bad for you to leave? Why not it gets to a point where it's below your standard? Because sometimes when it gets so bad, our ability to leave well and to leave in a way that is, you know, that you're resilient and an attractive option for another organisation can be impacted. But yeah, take the long road, take the long view, that is, and surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with good leaders. You know, find decent leaders. They do exist. And if you end up in a situation where you're not, then don't stay too long. I mean, I don't mean be flaky and flighty and, you know, skip along every 5 minutes when someone, you know, pours the tea the wrong way. I don't mean that. I mean, just at the end of the day, this is one life. You have one, you know, one beautiful life, and you deserve to be treated respectfully. And to be in an environment where you're valued and appreciated, not just tolerated.
Oh, that's such an important conversation, because it's something that I don't think we talk about enough, especially as women, that there will be times in your career where you've tried everything you can and you've hit the wall. And if things are an outright challenge to your deepest values and to your knowledge and sense of ethics or, you know, your professional knowledge, sometimes the healthiest thing to do is try and see that early and give yourself permission to start looking or, and I really say to women, keep a freedom fund, invest, like have some savings aside so you've got opportunities to do something different and nurture your networks. Don't put off going to your networking events because you're always staying late at the office, because that community is your professional development. It's incredibly nourishing and enjoyable, but it's also nurturing your opportunities beyond what you're doing at the moment, which is such an important currency.
100%, and it gives you that fuel, that you know, when you don't want to be bottoming out. It's like these things will happen, and you know, we all have knocks, and from time to time we've got to you know, address that. No, that's a really good point, and just to be mindful of your own situation. You know, like not. What am I trying to say? It's okay. Yeah, it's okay to say enough, and it doesn't have to reach so bad. But equally, sometimes giving things a bit of time, they start to turn if you're not allowing yourself to be drowned in it. Mind you, having said that, all the situations that I stayed in that I think, you know, in hindsight I should have left earlier, they don't tend to get better. It's about how you respond and what you're willing to invest and how you then manage your boundaries in that. I think they're great experiences to have to perfect and build those boundaries in your muscles of self-worth and self-respect.
I think it makes you a better leader too, because if you can empathise, if you know what it's like to have been in a situation where you haven't felt supported or whatever's happened, you can walk in someone else's shoes a lot easier and really be proactive in keeping in touch with your people and really try and understand what's important to them and be the leader that you'd like to report to. And not that anyone's perfect, we're all human, but if we never experience difficult times or challenges, I don't think we'd have empathy. We wouldn't be able to lead effectively.
No, absolutely not. And I think you value those leaders who are, you know, good leaders. You know, I look back and I've had, you know, quite a few, and you value them more. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, you value them more when you've not had that experience. I mean, those people who've always had wonderful bosses, well, great. Don't know what you did.
Won the
but
lotto.
Well done. Won the lotto. You know, but sometimes they're those experiences you learn the most about you, and you grow parts of you. So, you know, I don't regret any of it.
And maybe it directs you closer to your purpose.
Absolutely.
So do you have a survival tip for a woman who's just starting out as an executive?
I mean, other than surrounding yourself with good people and, you know, all the things we've just talked about in networking and things like that, I actually think the boundary stuff, working on your professional and personal boundaries, for me, you know, I've got a list of things that I do that help me sort of stay, you know, happy and healthy and wise, whatever, never allow those things to be pushed to the bottom of your list. You need to be at the top of your list. So, I've been on a walk this morning, I'll go on a hike over the weekend, yoga tonight,
brilliant
massage. We've all got the things that we need. I don't say go and have a monthly massage, because not everyone likes massages. But there are the things that light us up. I've got a list on my phone. I could open it now.
Nice.
These are the things that this is that. Go there, do this. Journal. It's very interesting. I do an online journal, and I get sent entries from a few years ago. On this day in 2012 or not 12, 2022, something like that. And you read and you go, oh, I've sorted that. I'm okay now. Like it's actually very. It builds those self-affirmation. It's like, actually I'm doing all right, and I'm growing, and I'm handling that situation better, and I feel like it's like a computer game. You just go up to a different level. You just get a different set of challenges. You've always got challenges. That's okay. How boring would life be if everything just went swimmingly? But it's take that long view and don't get too caught up in whatever's happening in the moment, because it will change. That's what we can be guaranteed of.
Fantastic. It's one of the certainties of life, isn't it? Change is a constant.
100%. Yes, indeed.
Oh, Paula, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your expertise and also your advice.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I'm sure you're inspired by that conversation with Paula. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can find links to Paula's LinkedIn and website in the show notes, and we'll also post those company directorship learning opportunities too. And if you're looking for a coach or mentor to help you thrive at work, you can find me at laureneyles.com.au. Until next time. Thank you for listening. This podcast was recorded on Awabakal country on Australia's East Coast. All advice is general in nature. If you liked this podcast, please like, rate and share. You can connect with me at laureneyles.com.au.